"How old is that boy?" Caleb Harrison asked, and Evan Parker knew before he even turned around that 6 years of silence had just ended. The Science Museum was packed with families, donors, school groups, and board members wearing name tags that cost more than Evan's monthly grocery bill. But suddenly, every sound seemed to fade behind the steady hum of the planetarium exhibit. Evan had been helping Oliver adjust a cardboard model of Saturn when he heard Caleb's voice. Same low tone, same controlled calm, same impossible ability to make one sentence feel like a door opening somewhere Evan had spent years trying to lock. He turned slowly. Caleb stood 20 feet away beside the museum director, dressed in a dark navy suit that fit him with the polished precision of someone who now had assistants for things normal people forgot to schedule. He looked older, broader through the shoulders, more composed. A faint line had appeared between his eyebrows. But the eyes were the same, gray-blue, exactly the same eyes currently staring up at Evan from beside the Saturn display. Oliver tugged lightly on Evan's sleeve. "Papa, the ring keeps falling off." Evan looked down. "Use the second clip, buddy." His voice sounded almost normal. That felt like an achievement. Oliver crouched to fix the model, completely unaware that the man watching him had once promised Evan forever and then disappeared before the ceremony started. Caleb's gaze moved from Evan to Oliver and stopped. Evan saw the recognition happen in pieces. The hair, the eyes, the serious little crease between Oliver's eyebrows when he concentrated. Caleb used to make the same expression while reading contracts at midnight. 6 years, Evan thought. Apparently that was how long it took a ghost to learn his own face. "Evan," Caleb said. His name sounded strange in Caleb's voice now. Too familiar. Too late. Evan straightened. "Mr. Harrison." Caleb flinched almost imperceptibly. Good. Petty, maybe, but Evan had earned at least one small moment of satisfaction. The museum director looked between them. "You two know each other?" "We used to," Evan said. Caleb kept looking at Oliver. "Who is he?" Evan's stomach tightened. "My son." Oliver stood and held up Saturn proudly. "It is supposed to spin, but Papa says the glue needs patience." Caleb stared at him. "What is your name?" "Oliver." "Oliver," Caleb repeated softly. Something in his expression cracked, just enough for Evan to notice. Oliver, meanwhile, had already returned to the much more important issue of planetary engineering. Caleb stepped closer. Not much. Maybe 2 feet. Evan instinctively moved, so he stood slightly between them. Caleb noticed that too. "How old is he?" he asked again. There it was. The question Evan had imagined in nightmares, arguments, and every version of this reunion he never believed would actually happen. He could lie. He could walk away. He could tell Caleb it was none of his business. Instead, Evan looked directly into the eyes of the man who had left an empty place beside him at the altar and said, 6. Caleb went completely still. Oliver had turned 6 3 months earlier. Anyone capable of basic arithmetic could do the rest. Caleb looked at Evan, then at Oliver, then back again. His face lost color. 6, he repeated. Evan folded his arms. "That is what I said." Caleb's mouth opened, but no words came. For once, the man who had built a career out of knowing exactly what to say had nothing. Oliver finally looked up from Saturn and studied Caleb with curious gray-blue eyes. "Do you like space?" Caleb swallowed. "I think I am starting to." Evan almost hated the answer because it sounded sincere. Then Caleb looked at him again, and the shock in his expression had become something heavier, something dangerously close to fear. "Evan," he whispered. This time his name was not a greeting. It was a question. Evan already knew exactly what Caleb was about to ask, and 6 years later, he still was not sure whether he wanted to hear it. Caleb waited until the donor reception ended before he tried again. Evan had spent the last 40 minutes pretending the museum required his complete attention, which was impressive considering he had checked the same exhibit label 3 times and could no longer remember what it said. Oliver stayed close, happily discussing Saturn with a volunteer, unaware that his entire family history had just walked into the building wearing a Navy suit. When the last group of guests drifted toward the elevators, Caleb stepped into the hallway outside the education wing. "Evan." Evan kept walking. "Not here." Caleb followed at a careful distance. "Then where?" "Nowhere." "Please." Evan stopped. The word still had power. He hated that. He turned slowly, keeping his voice low. "You do not get to appear after 6 years and start asking for access to my life." Caleb looked toward the classroom where Oliver was packing up his model. I am not asking for access to your life. Evan's expression changed. That sentence alone tells me you have learned nothing. Caleb closed his eyes for half a second. That came out wrong. It came out exactly how you meant it. Is he mine? There it was. No warning. No soft landing. Evan felt the old pain rise so fast, it almost made him dizzy. He folded his arms because he needed something to hold in place. You lost the right to ask me questions 6 years ago. Caleb's voice dropped. You were pregnant? Evan stared at him. You were gone. Caleb looked genuinely shaken. I did not know. Of course you did not know. Knowing things usually requires being present. Evan, I would never have abandoned a child. The words landed badly. Evan gave a quiet laugh. Interesting distinction. Caleb frowned. What does that mean? It means you abandoned me before you knew whether there was a child to abandon. Silence stretched between them. From the classroom, Oliver laughed at something. The sound softened nothing. Caleb looked toward it, then back at Evan. How long after the wedding did you find out? 3 weeks. Caleb swallowed. Did you try to contact me? Evan almost smiled. Not because it was funny, because sometimes pain became so old it developed a sense of humor. I called. Caleb's face tightened. I did not receive anything. I emailed. I never saw it. I wrote a letter. Caleb went completely still. Evan continued. I tried every way I knew how. Where did you send the letter? Your office. I never got it. That sounds like a problem you should have solved 6 years ago. Caleb looked away, jaw tense. I thought you hated me. I did. Evan's voice softened. For a while. Caleb looked back. And now? Evan glanced toward Oliver. Now I have more important things to feel. Caleb absorbed that quietly. Then he asked, does he know about me? No, does anyone? My sister knows. Daniel knows enough. Caleb's eyes narrowed slightly at the name, but Evan caught it immediately. Do not. Do not what? Do not make this about another man. Caleb exhaled. I was not. You were about to. Evan stepped closer, not threatening, just firm. Oliver is not a missing chapter in your love story. He is a person. He has a life, a school, favorite foods, a bedtime routine, people who have been there every day. Caleb's face changed again. Less shock now, more understanding. I want to know him. Evan shook his head. You want to know who he is because you just discovered he exists. Is that wrong? No, Evan looked him directly in the eyes. But wanting something is not the same as being ready for it. Caleb was quiet. Then, carefully, what do I have to do? Evan looked toward the classroom where Oliver was trying to carry Saturn with both hands. 6 years ago, he would have given Caleb 1,000 answers. Come back. Explain. Choose me. Now he had only one. First, you tell me why you never showed up that day. 6 years earlier, the ballroom smelled like white roses, vanilla cake, and expensive champagne, which would have been romantic if Evan had not been standing alone beneath an arch of flowers wondering whether the man he loved had forgotten their wedding existed. At first, nobody panicked. Caleb was 10 minutes late, then 20. His best man kept checking his phone. Rachel smiled too brightly and told Evan there had probably been traffic. Evan believed her because believing her was easier than looking at the empty space beside the officiant. 30 minutes passed. The string quartet began repeating the same songs. Guests stopped pretending not to whisper. Evan stood in a small side room with his jacket still perfectly buttoned and his hands wrapped around a paper cup of water he had not touched. Call him again, he said. Rachel was already doing it. Straight to voicemail. His driver? No answer. His office? They say he is unavailable. Evan stared at her. Unavailable. Rachel closed her eyes. I know. He looked down at his left hand. The ring was waiting in a small velvet box on the table. Caleb's ring was beside it. 2 circles. 2 promises. 1 person missing. Maybe something happened, Evan said. Rachel nodded quickly. Maybe. But her voice had changed. Evan heard it. That frightened him more than anything. 45 minutes. Then an hour. The officiant quietly asked whether they should postpone. Evan said no because postpone sounded temporary, and he needed temporary to remain possible. He walked back into the ballroom anyway. Hundreds of eyes turned toward him. Some looked concerned, some embarrassed. A few immediately looked away. Evan had never understood how loud silence could be until that moment. He stepped beneath the flower arch and stared at the doors at the far end of the room. They remained closed. No Caleb. No explanation. No last-minute entrance with some ridiculous story they would laugh about later. Just white roses beginning to lean beneath the heat of the lights. Rachel came to stand beside him. "Evan," she whispered. "We can go." He shook his head. "Not yet. You do not have to stay here." He said he would come. The words came out smaller than he intended. Rachel reached for his hand. Evan held on. Another 10 minutes passed. Then Caleb's best man approached, pale and uncomfortable. "I am sorry," he said. Evan looked at him. "For what?" The man hesitated. "I do not know where he is." Something inside Evan went quiet. Not broken. Not yet. Just quiet. He looked around at the tables they had chosen together, the candles Caleb insisted were unnecessary, the ridiculous lemon cake Evan had fought for, the place cards arranged alphabetically because Caleb liked order. Every detail suddenly felt like evidence from another life. Evan lifted his chin. "Tell everyone they can eat." Rachel stared at him. "Evan, the food is already paid for." His voice nearly cracked, but he kept going. "Nobody should leave hungry because my fiancé decided not to arrive." That was the first time anyone laughed, softly and painfully, because Evan had always made jokes when things hurt too much. He hated that about himself in that moment. He left through a side door before dessert. Outside, the evening air was cold enough to sting his face. He stood on the sidewalk in wedding clothes while taxis moved past, and strangers lived normal lives around him. Rachel waited a few feet away, giving him space. Evan checked his phone one last time. No missed calls. No messages. Nothing. Caleb had not said goodbye. He had not even given Evan something to hate properly. He had simply disappeared. Evan looked back through the hotel windows at the glowing ballroom and understood, with a clarity that made his chest ache, that being left was not the worst part. The worst part was not knowing why. 3 weeks after the wedding, Evan stood barefoot in his bathroom at 6:30 in the morning, staring at 2 pink lines and wondering how a piece of plastic could make a room feel smaller. He had bought the test because Rachel kept insisting stress did not explain everything. The nausea, the exhaustion, the fact that coffee suddenly smelled like burnt rubber. Evan had rolled his eyes, bought the cheapest box at the pharmacy, and expected nothing. Now he was holding the result with both hands because one did not feel steady enough. "No," he whispered. Then, after a long second, "Oh." The apartment was silent. Caleb's coffee mug was still in the cabinet. His spare key was still in the ceramic dish by the door. Evan had not moved either one because apparently humiliation had not cured him of sentimentality. He sat on the closed toilet lid and counted backward. Once, twice, a third time, because numbers sometimes changed if you hated them enough. They did not. The timing was exact. Evan pressed one hand over his face. For the first time since the wedding, he did not think about being abandoned. He thought about a baby. Their baby. The realization came with no music, no miracle, just the sound of the bathroom fan and his own breathing. He called Caleb before he could talk himself out of it. Straight to voicemail. Evan stared at the screen. Of course. He called again at 8, then at noon. Then after his doctor confirmed the pregnancy that afternoon. Nothing. He left a message outside the clinic, standing beneath a gray sky with a paper folder tucked under his arm. "Caleb, I need you to call me." He paused, forcing his voice to stay steady. "This is important. I am pregnant." The words sounded unreal once they existed outside his head. "I do not know where you are, and I do not know why you left, but you need to know." He ended the call and waited. 1 hour. 3 hours. A full day. No response. Evan emailed next. Then again 2 days later. The first message was careful. The second was angry. The third was only 4 sentences because grief had finally made him efficient. "I am not asking you to come back to me. I am asking you to acknowledge that there is a child. Please answer." Nothing. A week later, Rachel sat at his kitchen table with a legal pad and the expression she usually wore when solving other people's disasters. "We send something certified," she said. Evan rubbed his temples. "To where?" "His office." "What if he is not there?" "Then someone signs for it." Evan looked toward the window. "And if someone signs for it, and he still says nothing?" Rachel went quiet. That was the question neither of them wanted to answer. They mailed the letter anyway. Evan tracked it obsessively until the website showed delivered. Signed for by someone in Caleb's office. 3 days passed. Then 5. Then 10. Still nothing. By the end of the month, Evan stopped carrying his phone from room to room. He stopped checking every vibration like it might change his life. At his next appointment, the doctor turned the monitor toward him and showed him a tiny flicker on the screen. There is the heartbeat. Evan stared. The sound was quick and steady. Real. He felt something inside him shift. Not forgiveness. Not closure. Something firmer. "Hi," he whispered. The doctor smiled and pretended not to notice his eyes filling. Evan left the clinic with the ultrasound photo tucked safely inside his wallet. Outside, he sat in his car and looked at Caleb's name in his contacts for a long time. Then he opened one final message. "I tried. I called. I wrote. I waited. I am done waiting." He did not send it. He deleted the draft instead. That night, Evan moved Caleb's mug to the back of the cabinet and took the spare key out of the dish by the door. It was not dramatic. Nobody applauded. But for the first time since the wedding, Evan made a decision that did not depend on whether Caleb ever came back. Oliver arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning with a full head of dark hair, a serious little frown, and lungs strong enough to convince Evan that sleep had officially become a luxury item. The first year disappeared in a blur of bottles, laundry, pediatric appointments, and the strange mathematics of parenthood, where 3 hours of sleep somehow had to equal a full day of functioning. Rachel came over whenever she could. Daniel brought groceries, fixed the broken cabinet hinge, and learned very quickly that babies did not respect expensive shirts. But at 2 in the morning, when Oliver was crying and the apartment was dark except for the small lamp beside the couch, it was usually Evan holding him. "We are figuring this out," Evan would whisper. Sometimes he was talking to Oliver. Sometimes he was talking to himself. Caleb never called, never wrote, never appeared. The silence became less like a wound and more like weather. Always there, but eventually something Evan stopped checking before leaving the house. Oliver took his first steps at 14 months, walking 3 determined feet from the couch to Evan before collapsing into his arms with a laugh. Evan cried harder than Oliver did. At 2, Oliver developed a deep distrust of broccoli and an even deeper love for anything shaped like a rocket. At 3, he caught his first bad fever, and Evan spent the night sitting beside his bed with a cool washcloth and a thermometer, counting every breath because fear made numbers feel useful. At 4, Oliver started preschool and refused to let go of Evan's hand at the classroom door. "You will come back?" he asked. Evan crouched until they were eye level. "Always." The word came out before he could think about it. Oliver studied him. "Promise." Evan smiled. "Promise." He kept it. Every afternoon, no matter how busy the museum was, Evan was there when school ended. Sometimes with snacks. Sometimes with coffee he had forgotten to drink. Once with 2 different shoes because mornings were apparently an extreme sport. Oliver noticed everything. "Papa, your shoes do not match." Evan looked down. "They are both brown. One is black. We are calling that dark brown." Oliver accepted this because children were generous when adults were embarrassing. By 5, the ceiling above Oliver's bed was covered with glow-in-the-dark stars. Evan had placed every one while standing on a chair that Daniel insisted was unsafe. Oliver knew the names of all 8 planets and treated Pluto's reclassification as a personal injustice. Their refrigerator filled with drawings. Their weekends filled with science videos, pancake experiments, and trips to the museum where Evan worked in the children's education department. Life became ordinary in the best possible way. Birthday candles, lost mittens, bedtime stories, parent-teacher conferences, too many plastic dinosaurs. The kind of life Evan once thought required 2 people. He had been wrong. It required people who stayed. Rachel stayed. Daniel stayed. Evan stayed. That mattered more than titles, more than biology, more than promises made under chandeliers. One evening, shortly after Oliver turned 6, he sat at the kitchen table building a model of the solar system while Evan answered emails beside him. "Papa." "Yeah, buddy. How do you know someone loves you?" Evan stopped typing. Of all the questions Oliver could ask on a Tuesday night, naturally, he chose the one with emotional consequences. "Why do you ask?" Oliver shrugged. "Daniel says Aunt Rachel loves us because she always brings too much food." Evan smiled. "That is one sign." Oliver waited. Evan looked at the small hands carefully painting Jupiter. Then he said, "I think love is something people do. They listen. They remember. They come when they say they will." Oliver nodded seriously. "So being there is like a verb." Evan blinked. "That is actually pretty good." Oliver grinned. Evan looked at him and felt something settle deep inside his chest. 6 years ago, he had thought love was a promise spoken before witnesses. Now he understood it differently. Love was 1,000 ordinary actions repeated until they became a life. Caleb's first meeting with Oliver lasted exactly 47 minutes, although Evan only knew that because he checked the clock often enough to make himself feel ridiculous. They met on a Saturday afternoon at a quiet public library with a children's science room, a place Evan chose because it was neutral, familiar, and impossible for Caleb to turn into a performance. Caleb arrived 10 minutes early carrying a large gift bag. Evan noticed it immediately and sighed. "What is that?" Caleb looked down. "A telescope." Evan closed his eyes. "Of course it is. He likes space." "He is 6, Caleb. It is beginner-friendly." "How much did it cost?" Caleb hesitated. Evan stared at him. "That expensive? I thought he might like it." Evan rubbed his forehead. "He probably would. That is not the point." Before Caleb could answer, Oliver appeared from behind a bookshelf holding 3 astronomy books against his chest. He looked at Caleb with calm curiosity. "You are the man from the museum." Caleb smiled carefully. "I am." Oliver glanced at the gift bag. "Is that for me?" Evan gave Caleb a warning look. Caleb slowly set the bag beside the chair. "Maybe later." Oliver accepted this and climbed into the seat across from him. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Caleb had negotiated acquisitions worth millions of dollars without blinking, yet one 6-year-old had apparently defeated his entire vocabulary. Oliver solved the problem for him. "Do you know why Pluto is not a planet anymore?" Caleb blinked. "Because it is too small." Oliver's expression changed instantly. Not angry. Worse. Disappointed. "No." Caleb looked at Evan for help. Evan folded his arms. "Do not look at me. This is your interview." Oliver opened one of his books. It did not clear its orbit. Caleb nodded slowly. "Right. And there are other objects near it." "I see." Oliver studied him. "You do not know very much about space." Caleb gave a small, honest smile. "Apparently not." Oliver seemed satisfied by the admission. "I can teach you." Something in Caleb's face softened. "I would like that." For the next half hour, Oliver explained dwarf planets, asteroid belts, and why Saturn was still superior to Jupiter despite Jupiter being larger. Caleb listened with an intensity Evan remembered from boardrooms and late-night conversations years ago. The difference was that Oliver did not care about Caleb's status. He cared whether Caleb remembered what he had just said. "What is my favorite planet?" Oliver asked suddenly. Caleb answered without hesitation. "Saturn." "Why?" Caleb paused. "Because of the rings." Oliver narrowed his eyes. "That is only part of it." Caleb thought harder. "Because you think it looks like somebody forgot to finish drawing it." Oliver smiled. A real smile. Evan felt his chest tighten unexpectedly. There it was. Small. Dangerous. A connection. When the meeting ended, Oliver picked up his backpack and glanced at the untouched gift bag. "Are you still giving me the telescope?" Caleb looked at Evan first. "That mattered. Only if your papa says it is okay." Evan considered it. "Not today." Caleb nodded. No argument. Oliver did not seem bothered. He waved and followed Evan toward the exit. In the parking lot, Oliver slipped his hand into Evan's. "He is kind of bad at space." Evan laughed. "Very bad. But he listens." Evan looked back through the glass doors. Caleb was still inside, standing beside the table with the expensive telescope at his feet and Oliver's astronomy book open in front of him. That night, long after Oliver went to bed, Evan received a message. Caleb had sent a photograph of a library book on dwarf planets. Under it were 6 words. "I am studying for next time." Evan stared at the screen longer than he wanted to admit. Caleb had always been good at grand gestures. This was not one. Somehow, that made it harder to ignore. The second meeting happened 1 week later at the same library, and this time Caleb arrived without a gift bag. Evan noticed that before anything else. No telescope. No expensive box. No attempt to buy his way into a relationship that did not belong to him yet. Just Caleb in a dark sweater, holding a paperback book about dwarf planets and looking slightly nervous. Oliver spotted him first. "You studied." Caleb lifted the book. "I did." Oliver climbed into the chair across from him with the seriousness of a professor about to examine an underprepared student. "Why is Pluto not a planet?" Caleb did not hesitate. "Because it has not cleared its orbital neighborhood, even though it still orbits the sun and has enough gravity to be round." Oliver's eyes widened. "And?" Caleb smiled. "And there are other objects near its orbit, which means it does not meet all the requirements for a full planet. Oliver turned toward Evan. He got better. Evan folded his arms. I can see that. Caleb glanced at him, and for one strange second the expression on his face looked almost like the man Evan remembered from years ago. Not the polished executive, not the missing groom, just Caleb, pleased because he had done something small correctly. Evan looked away before the memory could settle. Oliver spent the next hour testing him on planets, moons, and the asteroid belt. Caleb got 2 answers wrong, admitted both without pretending otherwise, and wrote down the names of 3 books Oliver recommended. That impressed Evan more than the correct answers. Caleb had once hated being wrong. He used to argue with restaurant menus if the description of a dish seemed inaccurate. Watching him accept correction from a 6-year-old without resistance felt almost supernatural. What is your favorite planet now? Oliver asked. Caleb considered it seriously. Saturn. Oliver narrowed his eyes. Because it is mine? Partly. That is cheating. Caleb leaned back in his chair. Then Neptune. Oliver looked suspicious. Why? It has the strongest winds in the solar system. Oliver blinked. You really did study. Caleb smiled. I was warned the interview process was demanding. Evan almost laughed and hated himself for almost laughing. By the end of the afternoon, Oliver had moved from sitting across from Caleb to sitting beside him, both of them bent over a book filled with photographs from space telescopes. Their heads tilted at nearly the same angle. Evan noticed that too. Genetics was unfair that way. It showed up in gestures nobody had permission to recognize. When the librarian announced closing time, Oliver groaned. Can we come back next Saturday? The question was directed at Caleb. Caleb did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked at Evan. Only if your papa is comfortable with that. Oliver turned hopefully. Evan felt the weight of both faces waiting for him. We will see. Oliver sighed dramatically. That means probably. That means we will see. Outside, the afternoon was cold and bright. Oliver skipped several steps ahead, while Evan and Caleb walked behind him. Thank you, Caleb said quietly. Evan kept his eyes forward. For what? For letting me have another hour. Do not make it sentimental. I am trying not to. Try harder. Caleb gave a small laugh. The sound caught Evan off guard. 6 years vanished for half a second. Then they returned all at once. Caleb's expression changed when he noticed. I am sorry. Evan stopped walking. For laughing? For reminding you? Evan studied him. You cannot control what reminds me. Caleb nodded. I know. Oliver turned around from 20 feet ahead. Are you coming? Evan called back. Yes. Caleb looked at Oliver, then at Evan. He is incredible. He is. You did that. Evan's jaw tightened slightly. I raised him. That is what I mean. No claim. No assumption. Caleb simply acknowledged the truth. Evan looked at him for a long moment. Keep doing this. Caleb frowned. Doing what? Learning who he is instead of deciding who you think he should be. Caleb's answer came quietly. I can do that. Evan watched Oliver waiting beneath a tree, impatient and bright-eyed. Then show me. The question came 2 Saturdays later because Oliver had decided the hallway closet was an archaeological site. Evan was in the kitchen answering work emails when he heard the unmistakable sound of a cardboard box sliding across the floor, followed by Oliver saying, Papa, why do you have so many old pictures? Evan froze. There were boxes in that closet he had not opened in years. Which pictures? He called, already standing. The fancy ones. That was worse. Evan reached the hallway, just as Oliver pulled a photograph from an old envelope. Caleb stood beside Evan in the picture, both of them dressed for the rehearsal dinner, smiling beneath strings of warm lights. Evan remembered the exact night. Caleb had complained about the seating chart. Evan had laughed at him. They had gone home convinced the hardest part of marriage would be deciding where to spend Thanksgiving. Oliver looked from the photograph to Evan. That is Caleb. Evan swallowed. Yes. Oliver turned the picture around. Why are you dressed like that? It was before a wedding. Oliver's eyes brightened. Whose wedding? Evan considered lying for approximately half a second. Then he remembered every promise he had made himself about secrets becoming shame. Mine. Oliver blinked. You married someone? No, but you said it was your wedding. Evan sat on the floor beside him. It was supposed to be. Oliver looked at the photograph again. His little forehead creased. Were you going to marry Caleb? There it was. Children had a remarkable talent for walking directly into emotional disasters without taking off their shoes. Evan nodded. Yes. Oliver was quiet for several seconds. But you did not. No, why? Evan looked at the picture. 6 years had not changed the frozen smiles. That was the cruel thing about photographs. They never learned what happened next. Because Caleb did not come. Oliver's expression shifted from curiosity to confusion. He forgot. No, Evan kept his voice gentle. He made a choice, and he did not show up. Oliver stared at him. But you were waiting? Evan nodded. Yes. That is mean. The simplicity of it nearly broke something open inside him. Not cruel. Not complicated. Just mean. Evan gave a small, tired smile. It hurt. Oliver moved closer until his shoulder touched Evan's arm. Did you cry? A little. Oliver studied him skeptically. A lot. Evan laughed softly. Maybe a lot. Oliver leaned against him, still holding the photograph. Does Caleb know you cried? I think he knows now. Did he say sorry? Yes. Did that fix it? Evan looked down at his son. No, Oliver seemed surprised. Sorry does not fix things. Sometimes it helps. But some things need more than words. Oliver thought about that. Like being there. Evan's chest tightened. Exactly. Oliver returned his attention to the picture. Was Caleb my dad then? Evan took a slow breath. They had not used that word yet. Biological father, yes. Caleb, yes. Dad was different. He was already part of where you came from, Evan said carefully. Oliver nodded, accepting the explanation for the moment. Then he asked, why did he leave you? Evan stared at the old photograph. He could have given Oliver his anger. He could have filled in the blanks with every conclusion he had carried for years. He did not. That is a question Caleb needs to answer himself. Oliver looked up. Can I ask him? Evan's first instinct was no. Immediate. Protective. But Oliver had the right to understand his own story in pieces he could carry. If you want to. Oliver placed the photograph carefully on the floor. I want to. That evening, Caleb arrived for their scheduled visit carrying 2 library books and a paper model of Neptune. Oliver met him at the door without mentioning planets. Caleb. Yeah. Oliver held up the photograph. The color drained from Caleb's face. Oliver looked directly at him and asked, why did you leave Papa when he was waiting for you? Caleb stopped in the doorway, and for the first time since coming back, there was nowhere left for him to hide. Caleb looked at the photograph in Oliver's hands for a long moment before stepping fully inside. He set the books and paper model on the entry table without taking his eyes off the picture. Evan stayed near the kitchen doorway, close enough to intervene if the conversation became too heavy, but far enough to let Caleb answer for himself. Oliver waited. Caleb finally crouched so they were closer to the same height. I left because I was scared, he said. Oliver frowned. Of Papa? No, Caleb shook his head. Of making a choice I thought would change everything in my life. But getting married changes your life. Yes. Caleb gave a small, sad smile. I knew that. I just did not understand that being afraid did not give me the right to disappear. Oliver looked down at the photograph. Papa said you did not come. He is right. Did you forget? No, Caleb's voice became quieter. I remembered every minute. Evan felt the words land somewhere old and unwelcome. He folded his arms, not because he was angry, but because 6 years ago his hands had shaken badly enough to make holding a paper cup difficult. Oliver looked back up. Then why did you not call? Caleb hesitated. There were 100 adult answers available. Family pressure, business problems, expectations, fear. None of them belonged on a 6-year-old's shoulders. Because I kept thinking I would fix everything first, Caleb said. And every day I waited made it harder to admit what I had done. Oliver considered that. So you waited too long. Caleb nodded. Yes. 6 years is really long. I know. Oliver turned toward Evan. Did you know Caleb was going to come back? Evan shook his head. No, buddy. Oliver looked between them. Did Caleb know about me? The room changed instantly. Caleb's face went still. Evan had known this question would come eventually. He had not expected eventually to arrive while Oliver was still holding an old wedding photograph. Caleb answered first. No, Oliver blinked. You did not know I existed? I did not. Until the museum? Until the museum. Oliver looked at Evan again. But you knew. Yes. Did you tell him? Evan took a slow breath. I tried. Caleb's eyes shifted sharply toward him. Oliver noticed. Of course he noticed. How, he asked. Evan kept his voice calm. I called. I sent messages. I wrote a letter. Oliver looked at Caleb. Did you get them? No. The answer came immediately. Too immediately. Evan's chest tightened. Oliver tilted his head. None of them. Caleb shook his head. None. Evan stepped forward. You told me that before. Caleb stood slowly. Because it is true. The letter was delivered to your office. I never saw it. Someone signed for it. Caleb's expression changed. Who? Evan stared at him. I do not remember. It was 6 years ago. Caleb looked away, thinking. Oliver still stood between them, holding the photograph against his shirt. Evan immediately softened his tone. This is an adult problem, buddy. You do not need to solve it. Oliver frowned. But it is about me. Evan's heart tightened. Yes, part of it is. Caleb looked at Oliver again. And you deserve the truth. Evan gave him a warning glance. Caleb nodded slightly, understanding. But not all at once. Oliver seemed unhappy with that answer, which meant he was definitely Evan's child. Did you want me? He asked. Caleb's entire expression shifted. I did not know about you. That is not what I asked. Silence. Caleb looked at Evan for half a second, then back at Oliver. If I had known, I would have wanted to know you. Oliver studied his face carefully. That sounds different. Caleb swallowed. It is. Evan watched him struggle and, for the first time, did not rescue him. Caleb had spent 6 years absent from difficult questions. He could sit inside one now. Oliver handed him the photograph. Then you should find out why you did not get the messages. Caleb took it carefully. I will. Oliver nodded. Okay. Then, with the emotional efficiency only a child could manage, he picked up the paper model from the table. Did you bring Neptune? Caleb almost laughed from relief. I did. Oliver walked toward the living room. Caleb started after him, but Evan caught his arm lightly. Caleb stopped. Evan lowered his voice. He believes you. Caleb looked toward Oliver. I know. Evan's gaze sharpened. So do not give him an answer unless you are prepared to prove it. Caleb nodded. I will find out what happened. Evan let go. Caleb followed Oliver into the living room, but his expression had changed. For the first time, the missing messages were no longer just part of Evan's pain. They were evidence. And Caleb finally looked afraid of what they might prove. Caleb spent the next 4 days digging through 6 years of archived emails, old assistant logs, security records, and correspondence that should have been meaningless by now. It was not meaningless. Not anymore. The first email from Evan had been sent 3 weeks after the wedding. Caleb found the subject line buried in an old corporate archive. Please call me. The message itself never reached his inbox. It had been redirected. The second message had been flagged. The third had been moved into a restricted folder he had never known existed. By the time Caleb found the paper trail, his office felt colder than usual. He sat alone at his desk after midnight, city lights reflecting against the windows, and read the same administrative note 3 times. Personal correspondence involving Evan Parker is to be routed through executive review. Authorized by Harrison Sr. Caleb leaned back slowly. His father. Of course. The explanation fit too neatly, which somehow made it worse. He searched deeper. The certified letter had arrived. Someone in his father's office had signed for it. The envelope had been scanned, logged, and forwarded to legal. Caleb never saw it. Neither did anyone who might have told him. He found one more thing near the end of the archive. An internal message from his father's chief of staff, dated 2 months after the wedding. Matter resolved. No further contact expected. Caleb stared at those 4 words until they stopped looking like English. Matter resolved. Evan had been pregnant. Oliver had existed. And somewhere inside a building Caleb thought he controlled, people had reduced both of them to a problem that had been handled. The next morning, Caleb asked Evan to meet him at a quiet coffee shop near the museum. Evan arrived with guarded eyes and no patience. You found something. Caleb nodded. Yes. He slid a folder across the table. Evan did not touch it. Tell me. Caleb took a breath. Your emails were blocked. Evan's expression did not change. By who? My father's office. Silence. Caleb continued. The letter arrived too. It was intercepted. There was a standing instruction to redirect anything from you. Evan looked down at the folder, then back at Caleb. So you really did not know? No, Evan gave a small, bitter laugh. That is supposed to make this better? No, Caleb answered immediately. It does not. Evan studied him, almost surprised. Caleb looked at his hands. I spent 4 days wanting this to be the answer that excused everything. He shook his head. It does not. Evan's jaw tightened. Good. Caleb met his eyes. My father stopped your messages. Evan said nothing. Caleb forced himself to continue. But he did not make me leave you that day. The silence between them deepened. Evan finally leaned back. Say that again. Caleb swallowed. He did not make me leave. Evan's eyes held his. No, he did not. Caleb nodded. I was afraid. I let pressure become an excuse. I disappeared because I thought I could fix the situation later, and then I was too ashamed to come back. Evan's voice sharpened. Your father blocked my messages. He did not make you walk away from me. Caleb closed his eyes for half a second. You are right. Evan's expression shifted. Not softer, just less guarded for one brief moment. Do you know how long I needed to hear that? 6 years. Yes. Caleb looked toward the window. I cannot change what I did. No, but I can make sure Oliver knows the truth without carrying our mistakes. Evan glanced at the folder. Does your father know you found this? Not yet. What are you going to do? Caleb looked back at him. Set boundaries. Remove the people who helped hide it. Make sure no one ever filters my personal life for me again. Evan nodded once. That is between you and your family. I know. Caleb hesitated. I also want Oliver to know I did not ignore him. Evan's expression hardened slightly. Careful. Caleb stopped. Evan continued. You did not know about him. That matters. But do not turn that into a story where you become innocent. Caleb absorbed the words. I will not. Evan finally reached for the folder. Then maybe you are starting to understand. Caleb watched him open it. 6 years ago, he would have tried to control the conversation, explain every pressure, defend every choice. Now he let the silence stay. For once, the truth did not need polishing. It only needed somewhere to land. Caleb did not tell Oliver about the blocked messages immediately. He waited until Evan agreed they could explain it together, because this time he understood that truth was not something he got to deliver alone. They sat at Evan's kitchen table on Sunday afternoon, while Oliver worked on a model rocket between them, carefully pressing silver stickers along one side. Caleb looked more nervous than he had during any meeting Evan had ever seen him attend. Oliver noticed. Are you in trouble? Caleb almost smiled. A little. With Papa? Probably. Evan gave him a look. Stay focused. Oliver giggled, but the sound faded when Caleb placed both hands on the table. Remember when you asked why I never got your papa's messages? Oliver nodded. You found out. Yes. Caleb took a breath. Someone in my family made sure I did not see them. Oliver frowned. Why? Because they thought they were protecting me. From Papa? From choices they did not want me to make. Oliver looked toward Evan. That is not nice. Evan kept his voice gentle. No, it was not. Oliver turned back to Caleb. So it was not your fault. The question landed exactly where Evan knew it would. Caleb went quiet. He could have accepted the escape. 6 years ago, he probably would have. Instead, he shook his head. Part of it was not my fault. Oliver waited. Caleb continued. I did not know about you because the messages were hidden from me. But I left your papa before any of that happened. Nobody made me do that. Evan felt something in his chest loosen. Oliver looked confused. Then why did you? Caleb glanced at Evan, but only for a second. No rescue requested. Because I was afraid of disappointing my family. I was afraid of losing my job and the future I thought I was supposed to have. Oliver tilted his head. But you loved Papa. Caleb's face softened painfully. Yes. Then why did the job matter more? Silence. Caleb looked down at his hands. Because I was wrong about what mattered. Oliver considered that with the seriousness he usually reserved for astronomy. Papa says adults can be wrong for a really long time. Evan covered his mouth, partly to hide a smile. Caleb gave a quiet laugh. Your papa is very wise. He also burned pancakes yesterday. Oliver. They were very dark. Caleb laughed again, but his eyes stayed bright. Then Oliver asked, Are you going to leave again? The room went still. Caleb's smile disappeared. No, Evan immediately spoke. Caleb. Caleb looked at him. Evan's voice was calm but firm. Do not make promises you cannot control. Oliver watched both of them. Caleb nodded slowly. You are right. He turned back to Oliver. I cannot promise that nothing will ever go wrong. Sometimes work will happen. Sometimes travel will happen. Sometimes life changes plans. Oliver's fingers rested on the rocket. Caleb continued. But I can promise that if I say I am coming, I will do everything I can to be there. And if I cannot, I will tell you. I will not disappear. Oliver studied him for several seconds. That is better. Caleb blinked. Better than what? Saying never. Evan looked at his son and felt unexpectedly proud. Caleb nodded. Then that is my promise. Oliver returned to his rocket as if they had just completed a perfectly ordinary negotiation. Caleb sat quietly beside him. Later, after Oliver ran upstairs to find another sheet of stickers, Evan leaned against the counter and looked at Caleb. You could have blamed your father. Caleb nodded. I wanted to. I know. For about 4 days, I wanted to make him responsible for everything. Evan folded his arms. And Caleb met his eyes. Then I realized he created the silence after I left. I created the reason there was silence to exploit. Evan said nothing. Caleb's voice lowered. I am sorry. Evan had heard those words before. This time they sounded different. Smaller. Less like a request. More like an admission. That does not fix it, Evan said. I know. It does not earn you anything. I know. Evan held his gaze. Good. Caleb nodded. No defense. No bargaining. And for the first time, Evan believed Caleb was finally apologizing without waiting for forgiveness to become a reward. 2 weeks passed before Caleb asked Evan to meet him without Oliver. No museum. No library. No family conversation carefully softened for a 6-year-old. Just a quiet coffee shop on a Tuesday evening. Rain tapping against the windows while people around them worked on laptops and ignored everyone else. Evan arrived first and chose a table near the back. Caleb came in 5 minutes later wearing a charcoal coat, his hair damp from the weather, looking more tired than polished. He sat across from Evan and did not order anything. This feels serious, Evan said. Caleb gave a faint smile. It is. Evan leaned back. Then say it. Caleb looked at him for a long moment. I still love you. Evan had imagined hearing those words again in 100 different versions of his life. In some, he cried. In some, he walked out. In one especially dramatic version, he threw a drink. Reality was quieter. He just stared at Caleb while the espresso machine hissed somewhere behind them. That is not the problem, Evan said finally. Caleb nodded. I know. Do you? I think I am starting to. Evan looked toward the rain-streaked window. Love was never what failed us. Caleb's expression tightened. Evan continued. Trust failed. Reliability failed. You made me believe I was building a future with you, and then you disappeared when that future became inconvenient. Caleb lowered his gaze. You are right. You keep saying that. Because you keep being right. Evan almost smiled. Almost. Caleb took a breath. I am not asking you to marry me. Good. I am not asking you to forgive me tonight. Also good. I am not even asking you to love me back. Evan looked at him again. Then what are you asking? Caleb's answer came slowly. A chance to keep being Oliver's father. However you define that. Whatever boundaries you set. Evan studied him. And me? Caleb swallowed. I would like a chance with you too. Evan's expression hardened slightly. Caleb raised one hand. Not now? Not as a condition. I am saying it because I do not want to lie to you anymore. Evan sat quietly for several seconds. You know what scares me? What? That you will become consistent for 3 months and then decide you have proven something. Caleb nodded slowly. That is fair. No grand gestures. No expensive gifts. No showing up with a house, a trust fund, or some dramatic promise that sounds good in the moment. Understood. No making Oliver feel like he has to choose between us. Never. Evan's eyes sharpened. Do not say never just because it sounds comforting. Caleb stopped, then corrected himself. I will do everything I can to make sure he never feels responsible for our history. That answer mattered more. Evan folded his hands on the table. And if you miss something? I tell him. I do not disappear. If work gets complicated, I communicate. If your family interferes? Caleb's face changed. They do not get to make decisions about my personal life anymore. Evan nodded once. Good. Caleb exhaled slowly. What else? Evan looked at him. Show up. Caleb blinked. That is it. No, Evan's voice softened. That is everything. Silence settled between them. Caleb looked down at the table, then back up. Can I ask one thing? Evan sighed. You already are. Do you still love me? There it was. The question underneath all the others. Evan felt the answer before he decided whether to give it. Part of me probably always will. Caleb's eyes shifted, hope appearing too quickly. Evan stopped it immediately. Do not confuse that with trust. The hope steadied. I will not. Evan stood and pulled on his coat. Caleb remained seated. So what happens now? He asked. Evan looked down at him. Saturday, 10 in the morning. Oliver has a science workshop. Caleb nodded. I will be there. Evan held his gaze for one extra second. Then be there. 1 year later. Evan found himself staring at an empty chair and hating how quickly the past could make itself comfortable in the present. Oliver's elementary school science fair had taken over the gymnasium, filling the room with poster boards, cardboard rockets, papier-mâché volcanoes, and enough glitter to threaten the building's ventilation system. Evan sat in the second row beside Rachel, while Oliver stood near the front with his model of Saturn, adjusting the rings for the 5th time. The chair on Evan's other side was still empty. He checked the clock. 6:53. The presentation started at 7. "Do not do that," Rachel murmured. Evan looked at her. "Do what?" "Check the door every 20 seconds. "I am not." Rachel raised an eyebrow. Evan sighed. "Fine." 6:55. Oliver glanced toward the entrance. Evan saw it immediately. That was the problem with children. They could pretend not to wait, but their faces always told the truth. Caleb had been consistent for almost a year. Saturday workshops, parent conferences when Evan allowed it, library afternoons, soccer practices, birthday cake, doctor appointments, ordinary things, small things, the exact things Evan had once believed Caleb incapable of understanding. Still, an empty chair had history. 6:57. Evan told himself traffic existed. Meetings ran late. Phones died. Life happened. None of those things had mattered 6 years ago beneath white roses and chandeliers. His chest tightened anyway. Oliver looked toward the door again. Then the gymnasium entrance opened. Caleb stepped inside wearing a dark coat over business clothes, breathing slightly harder than usual and carrying a large cardboard rocket under one arm. Oliver's face changed instantly. "You came," he called across the room. Caleb stopped for half a second. The words hit him visibly. Then he smiled. "I said I would." Oliver hurried over. "You have my rocket. You left it in my car yesterday. I thought Papa lost it." Evan stood. "I would like the record to show that I was falsely accused." Oliver ignored him and took the rocket from Caleb. "You are almost late." Caleb nodded seriously. The meeting ran over. Oliver frowned. Caleb continued before the disappointment could settle. "So I left before it finished." Evan looked at him. Caleb did not say it proudly. He did not look around to see who had noticed. He simply removed his coat and sat in the empty chair. Something inside Evan went quiet. Not healed completely. Maybe it never would be. But quiet. The presentations began. Oliver explained Saturn's rings with the confidence of someone addressing a room of professional astronomers rather than parents sitting on folding chairs. Caleb listened like every word mattered. When Oliver forgot one sentence, Evan watched Caleb mouth, "You know this." Oliver took a breath and continued. Afterward, he ran toward them holding a blue ribbon that everyone received, but he considered a major scientific achievement. "We should celebrate," Rachel announced. "Pizza," Oliver said immediately. Caleb looked at Evan. "Pizza." Evan nodded. "Pizza." They walked out together beneath cold evening air, Oliver talking nonstop between them. At the curb, Caleb slowed. "Evan." Evan turned. Caleb looked toward Oliver, who was explaining his ribbon to Rachel, then back at him. "Thank you for letting me stay." Evan studied him. A year ago, Caleb would have asked what this meant for them, whether forgiveness was coming, whether love was returning. Now he simply waited. Evan stepped closer. "You know what Oliver told me once?" "What?" He said being there is a verb. Caleb smiled softly. "He is smarter than both of us." By a concerning margin. Caleb laughed. Evan looked toward the school doors behind them. Years ago, Caleb had left him waiting in a room full of witnesses. Tonight, the chair beside Evan had been empty for 4 minutes. Then Caleb filled it. No grand speech. No perfect redemption. Just presence. Evan looked at him and understood that trust had not returned all at once. It had returned the way it should have been built from the beginning. One ordinary promise kept at a time.